Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Feels quite an exciting time at the moment with the budget yesterday. So thank you for taking the time to join us. A lot to say, a lot to get through. So I don't want to say much at the top of the agenda as there's a few things I'm going to reference at different points. So let's crack on. Miles, any apologies?
Apologies may have been received from Councillor Douglas and Councillor Holdsworth.
Thank you so much. And Councillor Denise Jeffries?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Okie doke. So any declarations of interest? No, thank you so much. Okie doke. Item 3, exclusion of press and public. Officers have advised that the information contained in Appendix 3 to Agenda Item 7 on Bradford Interchange Next Steps and Appendix 1 to Agenda Item 12 under the 19th Travel Scheme is treated as exempt under paragraph 3 of part 1 to schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as they contain information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the combined authority, and further it's considered that the public interest in maintaining the content of the appendices as exempt outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information, as publication could prejudice current and future decision making. If we agree, the press and public will be excluded should members wish to discuss the content of the appendices when we consider items 7 and 12. Are we content to agree the recommendation that the information is exempt? Yes. We're happy to agree. Thank you. Okie doke. Item 4. Minutes of the 19th of September 2024. Any comments or suggestions? No, thank you. We're content to confirm these as an accurate record. Thank you so much. Okie doke. Item 5, the Mayor's update. Obviously, clearly, today's news dominated by the headlines of yesterday's budget, in which we'll have an item next on the agenda, so I'll pick up the reflections on that at that point. Since we last met, I took a delegation of 12 businesses on a trade mission to the United States. Whilst I was there, I signed a health tech bridge with the Mayor of Nashville, a memorandum of understanding to encourage stronger links between our two growing health tech sectors. In addition, I met with the Mayor of Cambridge and Consul Generals of Tennessee and New England to explore collaboration, trade and investment opportunities. The visit took place to align with the Nashville Healthcare Sessions Conference and the Global Health Innovators Summit, supporting our businesses to export to the challenging US market. We also visited Boston to continue to build on the relationships developed during my visit last year, which led to reciprocal visits to the UK and enabled us to bring a business delegation with us this time to explore the potential to secure new partnerships and export contracts. Also able to visit the headquarters of existing US investors in West Yorkshire to strengthen those relationships and support future growth in the region, including Cummins, United Health Group, and Johnson & Johnson. It was also really fantastic to meet with one of the leading universities in the US, Vanderbilt University in Nashville, where we discussed opportunities for R&D collaborations, staff and student exchanges, particularly in relation to their Wondery Innovation Centre and Nexus at the University of Leeds. As a result of the meeting, the Vice Provost will be attending the West Yorkshire Innovation Festival March 2025 to continue to strengthen the links. Further details about the trade mission and the outcomes will be reported at the next meeting of the Economy Committee. I also wanted to mention the current state of the bus network in Wakefield, North Kirklees and South East Leeds. Frustratingly, Arriva Yorkshire advised us last month that they intend to make significant reductions to their bus network in our region. Their rationale is driver shortages linked to ongoing issues with Wakefield Depot, which has seen buildings on the site condemned. Despite the efforts we've made to train more than 150 drivers through our adult education budget, sadly, only a handful of them have gone to work for Arriva. We're in continual regular dialogue with Arriva and have stressed the impact any changes would have on bus passengers across the region and whilst attempting to mitigate the worst impacts And I know this is particularly tough for the residents of Wakefield. Now, Arriva have yet to confirm changes to services. We're expecting them to do this at the end of this week. And once we've confirmation of their proposals, the transport team are prepared to step in and find alternative operators. But we're not sitting on our hands. We're already tendering for some services we expect Arriva to hand back, so we can put in a new operator straight away. Also, Councillor Hinchcliffe, Councillor Jeffrey and I have written to the Traffic Commissioner to raise concerns about Arriva's parlous performance, highlighting that 10% of the scheduled mileage is currently not being operated. Finally, I want to touch on two meetings I was invited to on behalf of West Yorkshire, the Council of Regions and Nations, chaired by the Prime Minister, and the Council of Mayors, chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister. Unfortunately, really terrible timing because I was in the US on my trade mission when both meetings took place. I gave apologies to the Council of Nations and Regions, where the focus of the conversation was about the National Industrial Strategy and interaction with local growth plans. However, I was able to dial into the Council of Mayors meeting where we discussed the upcoming English devolution bill, which will set out the new devolution framework for England, empowering mayors and local leaders to really deliver for our communities. And I can't tell you how welcome this new approach to engagement with mayors is, and I really look forward to it continuing under this government. Okie doke. Any comments on Mayor's update? Great, let's move on to the autumn statement, the budget. The budget item provides an update on our budget submission, also gives an opportunity to update the Combined Authority on yesterday's budget. I'll pass to Sarah Eaton, our Director of Strategy, shortly, but wanted to say just a couple of things up front. Wasn't it a significant moment that it was the first budget delivered by the first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer, who is from Leeds? I was so enormously proud of Rachel Reeves, and I thought she did incredibly well with such assurance from the dispatch box. Now, we all know that she's taken some difficult decisions. I think it was an honest budget that's going to help turn our country around, whilst I know some of these decisions present real challenges for our region, especially for our business community, and I'll come to Mandy Ridyard in a moment to give us her thoughts. This has got to be balanced against the really welcome increase in the national minimum wage. It's going to impact on 40,000 people in West Yorkshire who are going to have more money in their pocket, support for the NHS, and prioritising longer-term investment in infrastructure. So I was pleased to hear the Chancellor back our West Yorkshire Mass Transit programme, the Transpennine route upgrade, and investment in Bradford Foster Square station. It was also welcome to have confirmed a year-long extension to our bus service improvement plans, though we await details of what our allocation will be. There's 640 million nationally allocated to additional bus revenue. We're expecting our chunk of that to come to us over the next few days, how much we're going to be getting from that 640 million. Once we know that, we are going to be able to confirm future plans for Mayor's Fares. As you know, we're not part of the National Fare Cap scheme. We were a first adopter, and we've got our own arrangements locally. I intend to keep those local arrangements so we can keep control of our fares in the region and ensure they continue to remain affordable to the public. We can't forget that the previous government was going to end the capped scheme in December, so there was an absolute cliff edge there, and I am pleased to see, whilst it's more than our Mayor's Fares, there is some certainty about low fares for the next year. I'm also pleased to welcome the government's commitment to fund the Levelling Up Fund bids in the region, including projects in Holbeck, in Leeds, and Production Park in Wakefield. Obviously, less good news, the government's decided not to proceed with a series of cultural capital projects as the previous government made them as unfunded commitments. This impacts on funding seemingly promised earlier this year to British Library North and National Poetry Centre in Leeds, and also the Bingley swimming pool. It's not the end of projects, and I'll continue to work alongside partners to make progress. We still have devolved funding committed to the British Library North, and I'll continue to update those round this table as we find alternative solutions to bringing that particular project forward. Now, the most exciting news, however, was confirmation, and you'll have heard me bang on about this for the last 3 years, that we are eligible to get this single integrated settlement with government from April 26, significantly sooner than had been the case under the previous government. That was scheduled 2028. The single settlement will allow us to take more control over the money that's spent in West Yorkshire, ensuring that programmes are properly tailored to the needs of the people of our region. So we'll now start the process of working with government to implement this new change, and I know we're in a really positive place to take this work forward swiftly. Can I pass over now to Sarah to take us through any further details before I open it up to comments? And can I just publicly put on record my thanks to Sarah and your team and the whole of the CA, who at speed responded to something, a budget of an hour and 15 minutes, and you managed to turn around overnight a very detailed look at the impact this would have on West Yorkshire. So the Treasury might have their own crack economists. We've got our own here in West Yorkshire. So just thank you to your team. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Mayor. So what I'll not intend to do is go over the kind of key points that you've made. So it's some really good news in some of that. But just as the paper kind of sets out, it's covering the submission that we made to government, and I think what is pleasing to see is that some of the key elements of that submission that we work collectively on with our local authority partners kind of picks up some of the key things that we highlighted there, which were particularly around the long-term single settlement for West Yorkshire, which we know is really important in terms of kind of reducing some of those competitive bidding rounds, enabling us to kind of have much more freedom and flexibility about how we spend resources to meet our ambitions. Kind of a new financial settlement for local government, reflecting the need that we know around supporting local authorities to kind of deliver, which is absolutely critical in terms of delivering our ambitions for the region. The maximisation of opportunities began through the new English devolution bill, so that's kind of building and developing on our kind of partnership arrangements with key government departments, which is going to be incredibly important in delivering some of the key priorities for the region around mass transit and kind of social housing decarbonisation, but also that ability to kind of bring forward new powers. And what we do know is that the devolution white paper, we're expecting that to kind of be coming forward quite quickly towards the end of November. We're expecting much more detail around the powers and flexibilities that we'll be receiving through that new devolution framework. So that's going to be a really important one to kind of watch moving forward. But also there kind of assurance that some of the current government would be honouring some of the decisions, and I think we've seen that in part way through the budget announcement that was made yesterday. I think it's fair to say, looking at the briefing that we've produced, that quite a lot of the activity that is in the budget this time round really does focus on kind of the first part of the government's plans and really covers a lot of things that might be happening over the current year. I think, and there's a lot of pointers to what might be coming forward in the spring budget next year, and I guess key point for us to think about is how we prepare for that spring budget next year, where we think we'll get some longer term detail around some of the proposals that might be coming forward. So just a couple of highlights that the Mayor's not mentioned. I think there's a real confirmation around local growth and the rollout of local growth plans, and them being fundamental to kind of delivering ambitions for growth across the country and specifically for the region. Unfortunately, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we've had numerous reports come here around that fund. Will continue into the next year, which is good news, but at a reduced level, and we're expecting there to be equivalent of around a 40% reduction in spend on UK SPF next time round. Not quite sure of the details again there, but we will be bringing that forward once we know. We know that the Multiply programme will not continue, but what we are able to do is kind of fund some of that activity through the funding that we will get moving forward. So there'll be an opportunity for us to think about our priorities for that fund as we progress. No detail about the rural fund in that announcement, so we'll be trying to press to see what's happening with that. I think also the long-term plan for towns will be retained, and that'll be reformed into a new regeneration programme, and that'll be supporting projects in Dewsbury, Keighley and Castleford. But I think, as I've just mentioned, the commitment to kind of reform of local government funding, and what we saw I think in the budget was confirmation of a comprehensive set of measures that would be supporting local authorities moving forward, and for the moment that is an increase in the core spending power of approximately 3.2% in real terms. And what we also saw is some additional funding there, £1.3 billion worth of new grant funding that will be made available to local authorities, including 600 million for kind of social care, and I think a 6% increase in SEND funding, which we know are particular pressures for our local authority partners. So really, really important that funding has come forward. But also confirmation that they would be reviewing the approach to kind of the funding allocations. I think just some other quick things. I think you've mentioned the money that's coming to transport. In addition to that kind of 640 million coming for kind of bus service improvement plan. There's an announcement of another 200 million from the CR STS fund, which will be coming forward, and another 640 million for other improvements around bus service activity. Also, 500 million, I know this is a small amount of money increase for local road maintenance, so we know that kind of potholes are very important, you know, for our local people and local communities. It's one of the things that kind of people feel is important to them. We also have seen an announcement of the government investing over £200 million to accelerate electric vehicle charging infrastructure, again a key priority for us. And I think on housing and planning, 500 million to top up the affordable programme. Just on skills, there was an announcement of around 240 million for employment support moving forward, and an announcement of around 16 Trailblazer pilots. We're not quite sure at the minute where we are in those pilots, but there's 8 around employment support and 8 around youth guarantee funding. And we know that there'll be an announcement of 3 areas that are being piloted around work and health, which is obviously a critical area of work for us and fits nicely with our plans. So we'll be waiting to see where we feature in those kind of announcements moving forward. I think just on trade, there was an announcement, I've just whipped past it, so let me just quickly move back onto that. An innovation, about £6.1 billion to protect core research funding. And of this, 520 million set aside for a new life sciences innovative manufacturing fund, which again, region currently has around 300 health tech firms generating about £3 billion a year. So as a basis for investment zone, that's a really good opportunity for us to kind of link into that. And then I think on policing and crime, just finally, commitment to increase funding, which will support, you know, kind of more PCSOs and, you know, that reduction in crime that's needed across the country. So I'll stop there just in terms of some of the key highlights. We've sent around the briefing note. People will have other things that they're perhaps interested in, which we will come on to discuss. I think just in terms of what we need to do next, obviously there's a lot of work taking place on the local growth plan. We do need to kind of start now thinking about what that single settlement will mean moving forward and preparing the devolution white paper. That's going to be really critical for us in terms of kind of getting ready for what's coming over the next year. But I think also, one of the key priorities is continuing to work to influence the government on our key asks for the next submission, really the spring budget, multi-year integrated budget. And as I said, continue to work with government to shape the contents of some of the other papers that are coming forward over this coming period. So I'll stop there, Mayor, and just if anybody's got any kind of questions or any discussion items there.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Before we open it up, could I come to Monday just to speak to the impact for businesses? Obviously, it's a challenging time, and my understanding is this is a 1-year focus, and Rachel Reeves has been out on the media saying she would not be doing what she's done this year again, and it was something she felt that needed to be done for 1 year. So it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, Mandy.
Thanks very much, Mayor. There's some good news for West Yorkshire in terms of the single settlement and a number of other things. But I guess for business it might be a slightly different message. So for small and medium-sized businesses, they are the backbone of the West Yorkshire economy. And of the 40 billion of tax rises, 25 billion of those was on the shoulders of business. That hike in national insurance and the reduction to the threshold will be a big challenge for many of our businesses. To put that into context, the median wage of around 30,000 will be an additional cost per employee of £700, which is significant. The minimum wage changes are the right thing to do, But the cost on an employee currently on the minimum wage going up to the new minimum wage will be about £1,400 for a business. So there is a lot there for businesses to absorb, and I think we need to be very mindful of that. There are mitigations, however, for small businesses. So the increased employment allowances are really welcome. And the freezing of the small business multiplier for business rates is really welcome. And we have a lot of small businesses in this region. I think that's good news. And there are other things that are welcome for businesses. The extension of the business rates relief, which would have seen a quadrupling of business rates, I think will now be a doubling, which, although still a challenge, is better than it would have been. So that's good. The fuel duty freeze is important to people, but it's also important to business, transporting your goods, especially in manufacturing, which is big for our region. We don't need more increases, and that's really going to help us. And some other minor things that are important for our region is the UK export finance extension to people to businesses in the supply chain. Could be really game-changing if we start to talk about that and help businesses understand what that could mean for them. Businesses want a stable tax environment, so the corporate tax roadmap is really welcome. And the freeze on corporation tax levels for the rest of this Parliament, I think, is something that businesses will really welcome, alongside the investment reliefs that are important to business confidence. The Chancellor also committed to invest 40 million, I think, to begin the much-needed reform of the apprenticeship levy, which all business trade associations have been asking for. Making that more flexible into a growth and skills levy, I think, will help businesses to be able to reform what they do in a way that suits business better. But there is no doubt that this will be an incredibly challenging time for businesses. So the work we're doing on our local growth plan will be essential to helping businesses grow. So that's going to be critical. It's important that we listen to businesses and our actual business groups and find out really what's happening with our businesses and support those where we can. So our business board will be watching that very closely, but if anybody has any specifics that they'd like to bring to my attention, then that would be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mandy. And as always, the voice of business. Thank you very much. So I've got Jane would like to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do agree with you, actually, that the Chancellor was very composed and, did a very competent job, actually. It was very nice to see. And really do understand that the government can't do everything all at once, really, much as we might like them to do. Really pleased to hear about mass transit. I think that's a vote of confidence in us as West Yorkshire. And also Forster Square, really pleased about that. But I really wanted some assurance, because my ears pricked up during the budget when I heard about East-West Rail. I thought, oh, our moment has come. But actually, they weren't talking about Hull to Liverpool or parts in between. And so, Mayor, I really like your continued assurance that actually the Calder Valley line, its electrification, work in Bradford, work in Leeds and so on, is still an absolutely key part of our plans for growth in the area.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely, Halifax is a thriving hub and needs that connectivity over to Manchester and beyond. Also, just to mention on that, just for your reassurance, the poor service from Northern, we have brought in, there was a Rail North Emergency Committee, and we are demanding better outcomes from Northern on that line. So I have got reassurance that they are focusing on the Calder Valley upgrade and electrification, so I'll give you more detail once I know more as well. Thank you. So, Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, very historic moment to have not just another MP from Leeds being a Chancellor of the Exchequer, but also being the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I have to say my attention was fixed to what was a pretty monumental budget for the country. One of my surprises, though, is how much people are pleased and grateful for the biggest decisions being the reconfirmation decisions that had already been taken by a Conservative government before this one got elected, because this one got elected on a platform of change. And I was really excited at the beginning because the Chancellor talked about invest invest, invest. But unfortunately, as the detail has come out, it feels like the only response we can give is when. So, for instance, I'm very disappointed because I wrote to you before, Mayor, about the British Library of the North, a very key piece of investment, cultural-led recovery for a key part of our city centre here in Leeds, delivering thousands of new homes in association with it, and yet we're told, well, in this paper it says it's reduced, but actually the Chancellor explicitly says in the budget that they're minded to cancel it. Now, you've already committed, I believe, £20 million towards it, but that can't be spent unless you get the reciprocal investment from central government. And I would just like to state now that I think we're all really behind you in getting that decision made as soon as possible. And it can't be kicked down the road because it was originally going to be a £70 million project. It's already now an £80 million project. And with construction inflation, it just becomes more expensive to the taxpayer the longer that the government dithers. So we'd really like some commitment on that. In terms of the hospital programme as well, I was disappointed that there was a commitment to delivering new hospitals, but no specific new hospital sites were mentioned. And one of the things that was included in it was that the Chancellor would want to prioritise those hospitals in the new hospital programme which were in build. And I don't know what that expression means, but I'm hoping that somebody around this table might be able to tell me, because the Leeds General Infirmary project is ready to go and they've demolished acres of buildings in readiness for it. So if that's not considered to be in build, I'd love to know who we can get to change the definition. And then finally, of course, we have the disappointing news that the Mayor's Fairs initiative could be undermined by a 50% increase in the minimum fare that's being offered to the country nationally. I know you have your own scheme, but of course, not knowing how much your bus service improvement plan pot isn't helping you to settle people's minds that are feeling the pinch and want to make sure that their transport is at least going to be cheap, even if we can't guarantee it's reliable if you come from Wakefield or an area like mine, thanks to Arriva. So I would have hoped that that kind of clarity would have been in place by now, considering the amount of preparation which has been made. So I just want to say we're fully behind you in getting that clarity, but I'm hoping that you're going to be able to tell us it's going to happen pretty soon.
Thank you so much, Councillor Galton, and I do share with you the ambition for cheaper travel across the region. So a couple of things. Firstly, around invest. The Chancellor has changed the fiscal rules, so we will know more in the spring about what these big infrastructure projects are. But nothing was set in stone because we have had so many promises from a previous government that were unfunded, that actually, given the state of the finances with a £20 billion black hole, the projects that were already agreed could have easily been withdrawn. So we are, in every meeting, keeping up the pressure for mass transit. It is going to be eye-wateringly expensive. And at a time when the Chancellor, as you've seen, is having to make difficult decisions, it could have been a potentially collateral damage. We have to keep making that case, and to have it reiterated about TransPennine upgrade, about mass transit, to have those reiterated for our region gives confidence to business that we are going to be the centre of rail engineering for the next decade. And I was very grateful for that. So whilst it may feel like a re-announcement, nothing was certain about looking at the future. So just on that point, regarding the British Library, I absolutely am with you on the fact that the British Library North is an iconic project. I am behind it all the way, and it is about the regeneration and the opening up of the South Bank. None of these projects are dead in the water, because you're seeing the fine print that the government have said we will consult on all of these projects that we've decided to withdraw on. So there will be other ways, what's the phrase, to skin the cat, and we can work in partnership to help deliver these really brilliant projects. But I'm going to come to James on this, because obviously both the hospital and the library and the Poetry Centre are Leeds, going to be in partnership with Leeds. But certainly the new hospitals, we had 40 promised, no spades in the ground. I think West Streeting has taken a very sensible, pragmatic decision to have a review. I am very confident that Leeds is, as you say, ready to go, and that will be a project that is, once the review is underway, seen to be something that we get going. Airedale, there is a confirmation about Airedale getting money to deal with RAC. So I think that's good news as well. Regarding the Mayor's Fairs, first in the country to be doing it, we know the impact it's had, 10% uplift on patronage, really important. There was, as I said in my opening remarks, potentially going to be a cliff edge. So I am very grateful for the certainty of the £3. Now, we don't know, and we will know in the next week or so, what our allocation is, and we'll take a view. But I will do everything I can to ensure that fares are as cheap as we can possibly do. We don't have control of the fare box yet. We are underway with our franchising journey. So there are challenges around that. But rest assured, I, like you, want to have as cheaper fares, but also the routes to match it. We don't want cheap fares and then no investment in routes. So it is a balancing act. But if I could come to James about the British Library and the hospital.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't keep Combined Authority too long this morning discussing all the projects promised and not delivered by the last government, but just to focus on the two we're working on at the moment that Councillor Galton raised. The British Library is a really, as Councillor Galton says, a really ambitious project with lots of moving parts. I'm confident working with all our different partners in there, we can keep this project. We can keep this project. We can keep this project moving. It was never the full amount to deliver the project in full was never committed, even by the last government in some of their quite fantastical unfunded announcements. But certainly we'll keep the project moving. LGI, as Councillor Galton and Lamb know, because they both signed a letter we sent to the government, we put in a strong submission to the review in hospitals around making the case for LGI. I mean, LGI started off in a programme of 6 hospitals to be rebuilt. The last government was better at adding names of hospitals to a list than they were actually building hospitals, which was probably getting things the wrong way around, but we certainly continue to make a strong case around the impact of LGI. And of course, it's a big part of our innovation arc as well in Leeds. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. And as home of the NHS, I am hoping that the government understand the importance of that innovation arc as part of the investment zones as well. And the money for the investment zones was also secured, which was very welcome, because that could potentially have not have been. Okay, so moving on to Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try and follow the spirit of not being too political around this table. Obviously, my job here is to represent the opposition groups. I'm not here to represent small business, but I am a small business operator, and I think it's important to bring that voice to this table. And I can tell all members of the Combined Authority, it won't be a surprise to Mandy, small business operators are angry, betrayed and worried this morning after the budget. The costs that were piled on to hospitality, retail and many other small businesses were huge. It's described as a challenge, and we like to say challenge as it's frightening and dangerous. And as we see from the OBR and all the independent reports, the consequences, every working person in this country will be poorer in 4 years' time than they are today. That's the consequence of, that's not a political point, that's what the OBR said, that's what the IFS said. Everyone will be poorer. Inflation is going up, interest rates are going up, real wages are going down, and growth is going down from where it was forecast to be over the next 4 years. That's the OBR's words, not mine. So that's the consequence, and that's the backdrop that we're now working in. Like every budget, there's still a lot of detail that we're waiting to to hear. That's not new to this new government. And there are good things and bad things in it, as you've alluded to, Mayor. Some of the things I would focus on, the LGI, and particularly the innovation arc that goes with it, that was crucial to Leeds. It is crucial to Leeds. It is deeply disappointing that, as much as we celebrate a Leeds and a woman, the first woman Chancellor delivering a budget, she did not take the opportunity to go into bat for her own city, and that is a huge disappointment. Hopefully it is still to come, but it could and should have been announced yesterday, and I think collectively we have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing on that until it's delivered. It's notable to me, and I'm sure many others, that Manchester and the West Midlands are still being treated as superior to West Yorkshire. I'm sure you'll share my disappointment in that. It's welcome, the single settlement coming forward, but I don't see why we couldn't have had it next year along with Manchester and the West Midlands, and I'm sure you're as disappointed as I am about that. The other group that are particularly angry, and I'm going to move on to some questions because I think the important thing actually is what's the real impact on our economy in West Yorkshire. So the other group that are particularly angry are farmers, which are a huge proportion of our economy in West Yorkshire. Lots of small businesses who suddenly feel, again, frightened and betrayed that the prospects of their long tradition of handing the family farm on to the next generation suddenly in jeopardy as a result of the changes yesterday. And I think there'll be a lot more to come on that. So I just have a number of questions, if I may, that hopefully officers can help with. So can anyone tell me what proportion of our economy and what the value is of farming and the wider rural economy in West Yorkshire? Around national insurance contributions, 2 particular points. What's the impact going to be on bus operators? And then how much of their budget is that going to take out of the public transport economy? Because they're a very labour intensive business. Every single bus driver is now probably going to cost, Mandy might be able to give me a better idea, but with the minimum wage rise, about £1,400 a year more for each driver of a bus. So somebody has to stand that cost somewhere. It's either fares, it's either subsidies. Very unlikely to be operators saying, yeah, we can just stand that cost and there'll be no impact. There will be an impact, and it would be useful to know what that's going to be. And that feeds on to a wider point. For simple math's sake, roughly this combined authority across capital and revenue spends about £1 billion a year, there or thereabouts. A large proportion, and my question is what proportion of that is delivered through third parties, whether that's the third sector, business partners, etc. And therefore, what is the cost pressure that's going to come back on all our schemes and services, because all of those are not going to be protected from the national insurance increases. So everything we do is about to get more expensive, unless we deliver it in-house, and significantly more expensive. So we need to understand the impact on that. And the final point on national insurance contributions, I wasn't clear from the budget, and I don't think anyone knows the details, so you might need to come back to us, but will combined authorities be treated in the same way as what's described as the public sector in terms of being their impact of NICs being offset by the government, or will we have to stand that cost? If we did, what would the potential impact be directly to the combined authority? So there's lots of other things that we could say, but I think the key thing is what's the impact going to be on West Yorkshire.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. And it's always really important to hear the voice of business. So thank you for that contribution. We might have a difference of opinion about certainly about the first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer being Labour, and I was absolutely delighted. And of course she would not be partisan. No one would expect her to be partisan for her own patch. She is leading the country. Certainly that is something that I'm enormously proud of. So there are some quite technical questions. So I'm going to come to Felix in answer to some of them, and then to Angela about the CA. And potentially if officers want to indicate if they've got answers to some of those specific questions. And then I'll come to Susan. Okay, Felix.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll attempt to answer the first one. West Yorkshire has 1.1 million people in employment. 1,700 of those are in agriculture. This makes up 0.2% of our economy. This is as at 2022 numbers that we've got. The 0.2% is similar for GVA share, which is about £107 million. Nationally, agriculture makes up 0.6% of our employment and 0.8% of our GVA. So we are underrepresented in that respect in terms of our contribution compared to the national average.
Thank you. You're happy to share that with Councillor Lamb. Anything else regarding rural? So, Angela?
Thank you. Obviously, it's the budget was yesterday. There's a lot of detail we need to understand. You are right. There was a commitment that public sector would be supported in the national insurance burden. We will be speaking with officials to understand how that affects us directly and how that money, we hope, comes to us and on what basis it will be provided. We have done a calculation based on our current workforce figures. The impact, because it's both the percentage point increase to the rate plus the lowering of the threshold. For us, that is looking at best part of 900,000. So we are obviously will be pursuing how we are compensated for that. In terms of the wider supply chain, some of the budget work we've been doing has been looking generally at inflation and what that means in our contracts. And I think the NI now adds an additional factor into that because we do have, as you pointed out, bus operators is one area. We have other contracts where we have, for example, our security arrangements for bus stations are outsourced. So we'll be working on that. We're due have a paper later on the agenda about our approach to the budget. And part of that is about updating some of the risks and pressures based on what we have learnt yesterday, and that will form part of the work when we come back to you in December with the headlines of the budget and the pressures and the figures that we're trying to manage within that.
Thank you. And Simon, regarding bus operators?
Yeah, certainly, thank you. Councillor Lamb's absolutely right to highlight that there are two fundamental revenue costs in the operation of a bus system: people and fuel. What we now need to understand in detail are the numbers that sit behind the revenue funding that was identified in the note in terms of the second of those elements. So the bus service operators grant is a development on from what was previously the fuel duty rebate scheme, and we need to understand the extent to which there are balancing ins and outs in terms of the overall revenue costs that operators will face, at the same time as gaining clarification, which we're hoping to receive in the coming week from the department in terms of our specific BSIP allocation. Only at that point can we give advice back in terms of what the revenue mix looks like for the operation of bus services into next year, and therefore what recommendations should we put to you in terms of balancing those. So I think it is part of the picture, but we need to have all of the relevant numbers in order to be able to paint that picture in the round.
Thank you. And I'll come to you in a moment, Mandy, but also just to say that in all of my meetings with businesses, there is a focus for them on a skilled workforce, on people being able to get to work, on a healthy workforce, and being able to ensure that the lowest paid 40,000 people in West Yorkshire are going to have more money directly in their pay packet because of the uplift in the minimum wage. And also 100,000 people who are economically inactive currently due to poor health. There is funding now to help them get back into work. And if we can fund properly schools, FE colleges, 300 million for FE, get that skilled workforce and support the foundational economy, the foundations of our society, businesses have told me that that is also important alongside obviously the economy. So it is a balancing act, and I think may have a difference of opinion, but I do think the Chancellor really did understand the importance of the right balance, taking the right tone to ensure that what has been destroyed over the last 14 years, there is some opportunity to rebuild. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I mean, I have to say that the previous government were absolutely reckless in managing the economy, and what we saw yesterday was the first step at putting things back in place. And it was refreshing to think about all parts of the economy, making sure the building blocks are thought of, acknowledged, and start to put some money back into public services. I mean, the fact that the £13 billion was missing for the infected blood scandal, they just none of us could do that in our budgets in council or West Yorkshire Combined Authority. You have to forward plan. There's going to be some money to pay out. Where is it? That 13 billion was missing from the national budget, and they've had to find that and put that in. And that is quite, that's reckless management of a national economy. And I'm really pleased to see somebody sensible in charge of the country and putting the building blocks back in place. So as acknowledgement also had the NHS funding going in, mentioned local councils and additional funding go to local councils. And then, as you say, we're hopeful in this multi-year spending review, which happened from next year, that there'll be further building blocks, actually making sure we're all better on an even keel. And the IFS internationally has said that's the right thing to do. So all that is positive. And obviously from a local point of view, we were disappointed in Bingley Pool, obviously. So a lot of people put a lot of work into that in terms of campaigning over the years, local councillors particular and the local MP. Now, obviously we put a bid in 2 years before, and were told that was not successful by a Conservative government. And then just before the election, all of a sudden the money came, and we were obviously pleased about that. But obviously now that is no longer the case. That money didn't seem to be in the national budget. But we will continue to work on Bingley, and we'll be able to brief you on that, Mayor Brabin, and make sure that we continue to focus on the regeneration of Bingley and the assets that we have there. And we'll work with local councils, the MP and yourself, to bring forward projects there. And we will talk to government about what else might be possible. On the railways, it was mentioned actually yesterday, Northern Powerhouse Rail. And actually, I don't think many people realise that Northern Powerhouse Rail includes that Leeds-Bradford electrification. And that does benefit the Calder Valley line, of course, as well. That is in there. Obviously, Foster Square was mentioned, which we're really pleased about. So those services are definitely coming now in May 25. And obviously, mass transit Leeds Bradford. It's great to see Bradford mentioned twice in that budget in a positive way. So we're currently working on an outline business case for the new station in Bradford, which obviously is a game changer to get us onto the main line. And that will be really significant for us going forward. And that really, as you say, Mayor, is for the significant decisions in the comprehensive spending review next year. So we're all working towards that. Just on the hospitals, obviously Airedale, really pleased to have that confirmed. And actually just a few weeks ago it was announced that Linfield Mount would be have money as well, which is a hospital mental health facility in Bradford district, which serves a wide area. So we're really pleased about that as well. So from 4th of July to now, that's quite a lot of work to try and undo 14 years of austerity, of kicking public services when they're down and kicking them a bit more then. We need to be all grown-ups in this country, work together, acknowledge that public services need to function, need to be funded properly, and go for growth. And with the Combined Authority, we are going for growth. We've got lots of investment coming through yourself, Mayor, and together as a team, we can really make great things in West Yorkshire.
Hear to that, Team West Yorkshire all the way. And Mandy, you wanted to come in.
Thanks, Mayor. I think the point's been really well made, and the point about health and the importance of health tech, hospital building and everything else for this region is essential. I come from a family of farmers, so I do understand the points that you made, Councillor Lamb. However, I think that 3/4 of farms won't be affected by the changes, and within the changes that do exist, there are some mitigations. So I think that at least does mitigate some of those issues. I think the point that you made about bus drivers is really important. although the median wage, I think, for bus drivers is about 29,000, if I've got that correct. And therefore, it's not the point around the minimum wage as much as the point around national insurance, and that affects all businesses. I think where we need to look to mitigate is in sectors where headcount employees are the whole of the business. So the social care sector is something that we need to be completely and acutely aware of in terms of the cost that those businesses will have. And I think that also plays into the issues around health and well-being and hospitals. So the management of hospitals depends on the social care sector. So I think that that's something going forward that when we look at the business board, that will be a sector that we watch carefully. And if there are any others that you'd like to draw my attention to, then we'll note those too. But it's a difficult time for any budget because of all the reasons that we all know of. And so just making sure that we watch businesses because they are shouldering that cost, I think, is important.
Thank you, and it was pleasing to see that the carers allowance, you are now able to do more hours before you get penalised, and also kinship carers who didn't get any support, like foster carers, those people who are taking on children in their family and bearing the financial burden, they're also going to get support as well. So it is the poorest paid and the most vulnerable. It feels like that's been a priority for this government, because let's not forget, when it comes to land, some people are buying land in order to avoid paying tax. So I think Rachel was particularly looking at that and trying to protect small farmers. So finally, we must move on after this contribution. So Councillor Love.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try not to be any more political grandstanding. I think there's been enough of that in the meeting so far already. Can I just ask for some clarification from Angela on the national insurance for our own staff? The 900,000 you mentioned, is that you said it potential for it to be compensated for by government. Did the government already compensate us for the existing national insurance contributions we make for staff, and if not, why do you have the possibility that we could be compensated on this?
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. No, we're not currently provided with funding for NI. This was a specific announcement yesterday where it was trying to ensure that there wasn't a further burden on the public sector. So the budget announcement stated that there would be support for the public sector, but it didn't go into details yet about how that would find its way out to the different parts of local government.
Thank you so much. Okie doke, let's move on if everyone's happy. We're happy to note the submission that was made to the government ahead of the autumn budget as detailed in Appendix 1, and to grant the Chief Executive of the Combined Authority, in consultation with myself, delegated power to make in-year budget decisions arising from the Chancellor's autumn statement.
I don't think we need that.
Okay.
Given that no issues have been raised.
Very good. Let's strike that out of the minutes. Wonderful. Let's move on to item 7, Bradford Interchange, next steps. This concerns the phased reopening of Bradford Interchange. We discussed this at our previous meeting. As I've said previously, I really do recognise the challenge for the travelling public by this closure, and also appreciate their patience as we came to this conclusion. As the report confirms, the decision to close the interchange due to structural concerns was the right one. However, the latest surveys offer encouraging news. With the findings from Jacobs, I'm pleased that we can now safely move toward reopening the lower concourse by the end of the month. And if we agree the recommendation in front of us, the full reopening of the bus station and car park would be scheduled for the 5th of January 25, which I'm sure will come as a big relief to those who rely on the interchange. And as we reopen in a phased way, some ongoing resurfacing works will need to continue into the spring. Can I thank and put on record my thanks to partners, operators, colleagues, and the public for their cooperation in ensuring that smooth transition back to full service. And can I just remind everyone, Appendix 3 contains exempt information. If you want to discuss this item, let me know, and I will ask the press and public to leave. Can I pass over to Councillor Hinchcliffe, Chair of the Transport Committee, to introduce the report, and then Dave on further details.
Thank you, Mayor. So, like you, I'm relieved to see this paper coming forward with the final decision to reopen the interchange. And it was great actually to travel here this morning through the interchange, through the concourse open. Small steps, but that was great to see that progress being made. Like you, I want to thank the patience of the travelling public really through this time. It has been hugely frustrating for people. And I know they will share with me the relief that they can see a prospect of it being opened again. There is quite a lot of work to do with operators. You can't just switch it back on quickly and off quickly. Obviously, it affects, how much time it gets them into the interchange and to park and to move out, etc. So all that timetabling needs to be done. But we have some reassurance about the communications really going forward. Because what is really important is that people are aware early enough to be able to make plans, to know which services are going back in when, what the new times are, if there are new times, and I think that constant communication, even if there's very little say, I think is going to be really vital to make sure we have a smooth transition to the interchange. I think it's also worth noting, of course, that the work continues about the West Yorkshire Mass Transit and tram bus interchange, which is an opportunity out of all this. Let's make sure it's connected in the future with the new mode of transport that's coming in, and altogether that integrated transport system that we want to see. I want to see that in Bradford as well as everywhere else in West Yorkshire. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. Dave.
Okay, I'll repeat a little bit of that, but not much, hopefully. So by way of background, combined authorities, as you say, have been provided with regular updates on the status of the interchange closure since early in January this year. It's fair to say it's been a hugely complicated exercise to deal with changes, as you say, to bus services and passenger arrangements, really importantly, at short notice, while at the same time also working to get to a position whereby the bus station can reopen again. But throughout all this time, health and safety has been paramount. As we hopefully move to the next stage of remobilisation, it will continue to remain so. But on the back of the initial surveys over the summer and the expert advice which has been set out in the report, the lower concourse, which provides access to rail stations, as Councillor Hinchcliffe rightly says, did reopen at the start of the week, and this includes provision for toilets, which is a welcome move for passengers and wider in Bradford, because that has been one of the challenges that people have faced. The report itself highlights the extensive work that has been undertaken in terms of surveys to establish that this 50-year-old structure can remain operational in the short to medium term. The findings from the interim Jacob structural surveys, which we got at the start of September, have been reviewed by an independent expert forensic structural engineer. It's a long statement. And I won't go through it, but section 3.11 report is particularly critical, which sets out the key conclusions from this work. And these reports are also provided as appendices to paper appendix 1 is a Jacob's report, and appendix 2 from the independent expert. These do give us the assurance that we were looking for, which is also required for us to progress towards reopening, subject to ongoing inspection and monitoring, and this is work that we are currently sort of working through. The report also sets out briefly some of the financial challenges that we have faced over the year, and we've previously reported that what the cost of closure has been, and we made a budget provision for this. The current indications, now we have greater clarity, that the reopening costs are a further £500,000, which are attributable there. And of course, the ongoing re-waterproofing works has been remobilised, and that has some implications around the reopening, which I'll go on to mention. As well as this, there remains, as previously reported, a risk to relating to any claims from tenants which are yet unsettled, and anything further which may emerge, which is as yet unknown. But if I pull it back to the issues relating to the reopening and future transport provision in Bradford, as mentioned, we highlight the work that has commenced around looking at an alternative location for new interchange, recognising from the work we've had through the surveys that the current facility does have a limited life and the cost of maintenance will increase somewhat over time. And there is activity ongoing, as Councillor Hinchcliffe has stated, relating to the new rail station for Bradford and synergies with mass transit that go with that as well. But subject to a series of recommendations, the report does give us a green light for a phased reopening, which we are now working to on the 5th of January. The challenge we face within this relates to two key areas, really. Firstly, that not all buses will be able to initially serve the bus station, This is because of the ongoing works to complete the re-waterproofing works that was paused back in January. And this work is really critical. Whilst not in health and safety terms, it needs to be done to prevent the historic water ingress issues that the building has experienced. We don't yet have the information on specific services which will be in and which will out, and that will probably change over time, but we'll be working through this over the coming weeks. The second issue is the fact that we've highlighted in the report there'll be a lack of real-time information at the bus station when it reopens. This is due to some complex issues around timing of bus service registrations and data processing requirements requiring specialist input. While we've highlighted that initially we won't have real-time information, we will be developing a comprehensive strategy to ensure that all forms of passenger information are utilised. We don't just rely on real-time information. We have a web presence, we have paper copies, we have a presence on the ground, and this face-to-face contact will be really, really important in the initial period following reopening, and we'll make sure we cover that well. So communication, therefore, as stated, becomes of really critical importance, and the report does reference we'll be developing a detailed communication strategy over the coming weeks to ensure we get maximum outreach in advance of reopening and on an ongoing basis, even beyond the reopening. The final point I'd like to make is around scrutiny and what the experience of Bradford interchange closure tells us going forward. A workshop was held with members on the 18th of October with a specific focus around Bradford interchange, but with an eye on what the wider application of lessons learned for that could be. We covered 5 key points of inquiry, which were democratic oversight, communications, information and data, timelines and monitoring, and lessons learned. And from this, 2 key areas of focus flowed. Firstly is to ensure there's live ongoing scrutiny of the interim operations, that's to date and post-operations in January. And secondly, to ensure that future scrutiny of lessons learned includes all changes planned or made to asset management, emergency plans, communications, and the mass transit and bus franchising. So I'll stop there for now and we'll see if we can allow some time for any comments and questions.
Thank you, Dave. Just for my understanding, with the mitigations underway whilst it's open, what percentage of bays are going to be affected, do we know?
My understanding is about 6 of the 20 bays will be unavailable. That may vary slightly over time, but that's the indications we've been given at this point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Good news that the interchange is reopening. 2 points, if I may. First of all, as has been alluded to, the importance of communication and the practical opening. There is the potential for it to be incredibly confusing for passengers because, if I've understood correctly, we're opening in 2 phases. So not all the buses that previously would have used the interchange will be using them straight away, and there is no RTI available, as I understand it. So there clearly is potential for a lot of confusion for passengers. So we've said communication is important, but specifically, what are we going to do to make sure that we have really clear communication, and so far as humanly possible, people will know what's going on and where to go to get their bus and where they're going to end up when they get on the bus at the other end. And the second point you alluded to at the end there, Dave, around lessons learned. So I'm keen to understand, one, how this kind of crept up on us. So when you read the experts' summary advice in the Jacobs report, hindsight's always a wonderful thing, but it clearly should not have come as a surprise to anybody when the interchange had to be closed, that it needed to be closed, and it could have been prevented and planned for sooner. So the 2 parts to that question: one, who was negligent in that? And 2, can we have an assurance that we have processes in place that aren't other buildings and assets, the responsibility of the combined authority, that could be in a similar position?
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. And just regarding the communications, Dave, I wouldn't ask you to reiterate what you've already said about communications.
I won't go back into that, but the point is we will in the coming weeks, next few weeks, from bus operators, that much clearer view as to what specific services will be going in or not going in, and working through the plans both with the bus operators and with Bradford officers, bearing in mind the current construction activity across Bradford, getting assurances that certain critical pieces of infrastructure will be complete by that point in time. And then we'll start putting out the information, not just in Bradford, but at other bus stations as well, we recognise, and locations we recognise that people travel into Bradford and don't just start their journeys there. So that's on the first point. On the second point around lessons learnt, we've previously set out a report which does highlight quite a comprehensive history around Bradford Interchange, which included a lot of detail around the various rectification measures that have been put in place over time. It's been understood that it's a building which has a design life of 50 years, but that the investment is required, and increasingly so over time, to ensure that that remains operational in a safe environment. We've done quite a bit of work within the team over the last number of months reflecting on this, and I think part of this is also looking at how we can strengthen our assets team and our assets function, have clearer asset management plans going forward. We have lessons learned which come from building projects such as Halifax bus station recently and other bus stations. But I think the assurance about other structures, we understand there are no other structures which are built like this anywhere remotely near of a concrete nature, or structures which are at any form of risk of falling concrete or closure. But we do have an asset management plan in place. We do have a series of surveys which we are in the process of undertaking across all our bus facilities, and an investment plan for that which will follow as required. In most cases, they will be around issues around midlife refurbishments as opposed to end of life, looking at the assets.
Thank you, Dave. Okie dokie. Oh, Councillor Love.
Just briefly, thank you, Mayor. Can I just echo what Susan said about relief that this is finally coming to an end? I'd also like to thank Dave and your colleagues for the recent improvement in communication with elected members in Bradford, because that has, over the last 12 months been, or 10 months been sporadic in its effectiveness. And can I ask that going forward you include elected members in Bradford ahead of what's being announced publicly, so because we are people's first point of contact about this, and if you could take on board all the comments that were raised by the scrutiny committee as well, which you appear to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it has been raised at this committee previously about communication, but as just to say again, we couldn't tell you what we didn't know. So that was always going to be a challenge while we were waiting for surveys to come through. But I do appreciate your support for the reopening. Thank you. So are we happy to consider the information contained and approve the phased reopening of Bradford Interchange Station as outlined? We are. Marvellous. Super. Everybody very enthusiastic on that one. The people of Bradford will be delighted. Okie doke, moving on to item 8, the local growth plan. This is an update on the West Yorkshire local growth plan. It was a manifesto commitment of mine, something I promised to produce within the first 6 months of my term. A heap of stuff has happened since I made that pledge, not least a general election, a budget, and major transformation in our relationship with government. Now we've got a near final draft of the growth plan, which is circulating among partners for final comments, and it's going to come in front of you for approval when we next meet in December. Now, the growth plan brought together vital evidence of our strengths and challenges. We've engaged extensively with partners to ensure it captures our collective ambitions. The government's recent green paper on the modern industrial strategy aligns really well with our priorities. So it's encouraging to see West Yorkshire recognised as the centre of modern industry, and our response to the consultation highlighted sectors where we are particularly strong. We're continuing to work closely with government to refine our sector propositions, ensure they fit within the broader scope of our growth plan, which covers a much broader range of local growth factors, such as we've discussed, transport, place development and health. So if I could come to Councillor Lewis as Chair of the Economy Board to add his comments before then passing over to Felix Kumi and Pofo to talk us through recommendations.
And can you just go straight to Felix, please?
Absolutely. We did say that earlier on, so apologies for passing you the baton. So over to you, Felix.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'll be really brief with this. At the last meeting of this board, I presented the local growth plan. I had a set of slides where we walked through where we were, what the key priorities that we've been developing looked like, what the evidence had told us, and so our conclusion from that evidence, which informed obviously the priorities. We then also discussed the corridors the idea of the corridors that we're focusing on to give this a sense of place. Since then, as the mayor's just set out, we've been working closely with central government on the sectors, the key sectors, confirming the key sectors in our economy to make sure we are well represented and recognized in the National Industrial Strategy. And there's a lot more work that is underway. Since then, again, we have circulated a draft of the document. It's gone around all our local authority partners, our university friends, the ICB and other partners that we've been working with. Comments have come back. The team has been working on those comments and turning those around. We expect to share with you within the next week and a half, a revised version of that document. So you can look at that and feed back to us any final comments that we need to take account of before we send the final version ahead of your next meeting in December. So that's where we are, the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felix. And again, thank you to your team. Lots of interaction with government to identify what works for us. It's our growth plan, but also this growth plan will impact and guide the industrial strategy for the government. So the timing's also been great that we've had the budget now. So we're at the end of our process. The budget has now happened. We can see the lie of the land. And then we can have those final comments and get our growth plan off to government. Thank you very much for the work that you and your team have done. Councillor Galton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I found this a really frustrating paper because it didn't actually include any content in which was created by West Yorkshire Combined Authority. When I had my briefing, I was told, oh, well, it came to the last meeting and that's where all the detail was. But I wasn't at the last meeting. So
We missed you.
it would have been nice. It would have been nice if this decision, which we're supposed to be making today, was actually a decision, because all that we're doing is noting that there's some progress being made on it, but we can't sit here and read it. We have to be told verbally what it is. And when I go into the minutes of the last meeting, when you were discussing something which there was more information at hand, it talks about having to submit something in October. But this update, which comes a month later, doesn't actually say you've submitted anything in October. It talks about how you're still talking about something and you might actually hand it in 2 weeks' time. So are we behind the submission deadline?
May I jump in there, Councillor Galton? There was absolutely no point in preparing a growth plan without knowing what the budget... I mean, we absolutely had to take into account what the future year and the direction of travel of this government was going to be. But also, this is co-produced. So you would absolutely jump on me if I was like, this is what we're going to do without contributions from our local partners. So it was eminently sensible, I would suggest, that we take it after the budget so we know what we're dealing with and what the challenges that are facing this government. And apologies that you didn't have time to read the previous papers, and we did miss you. So you snooze, you lose, I'm afraid, if you don't come to the meetings.
It would be useful, Mayor, if the items in a board meeting were actually decisions instead of just a reference for someone to give a verbal update.
It's a process, but your comments are noted, and thank you for that comment. Any further comments on the growth plan? Yes, Councillor Lamb.
Well, just to help Councillor Gold, I wasn't at the last meeting either, so I took the extraordinary step of just asking someone to send me the slides so that I could see the information. So.
Innovative and top of the class. Well done, Councillor Lamb. Felix.
It's just to make the point around the submission, maybe there's a bit of confusion that I'd like to clear up. That was referring to the submission we made to central government on the key sectors in West Yorkshire that was then reflected in the green paper that came out on the industrial strategy. So the submission went in as we promised at the time. That was reflected in the national document that has been published since then, and we are working on our response to that green paper that is connected to, obviously, but separate to the local growth plan document itself, which picks up the entirety of our evidence and our response to that evidence, what our priorities look like, and how we're going to develop the economy.
Thank you for that clarification. Really welcome. Okie doke. So are we happy then to note the progress of the local growth plan and to endorse next steps? Good stuff. And I look forward to seeing you at the next CA meeting where we will be endorsing the plan and moving on with it. Okie doke. Moving on to the Employment and Skills System Review. As you know, addressing the skills gap in West Yorkshire is vital to unlocking future growth and opportunity. This report highlights the challenges we face with a significant proportion of our population lacking higher level qualifications. But I'm encouraged by the progress so far, particularly in developing a more integrated approach with local authorities. The interim report sets out key principles, and I'm pleased to see that the final recommendations build on this work, and I'm confident that once implemented, this new model will help us provide a better careers advice system, improve skills support for businesses, and ensure a more joined-up system across the region. Now, I'm going to hand over to Felix, but if you would like to make any comments, James, please do. But Felix, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. This paper brings together a lot of work that we've been doing in the last few months to make sure we are ready for what further devolution would look like. But also it was a good opportunity for us to take a step back and look at the skills system in the round and understand with partners what our role is, what the role of local authority partners and training providers and colleges and others in this system, what their roles are and how we should be working together to make sure we are delivering for the people who live here. Since adult skills devolution arrived in West Yorkshire, we've not had the opportunity to do this. So this presented a really good opportunity for us to do that. The paper that you've got came with an annex, which has the exact summary of the work that has been done. And it particularly sets out in section 3.9, I won't go into detail, but a very high level description of the various levels of activity and areas in which different partners will be working together. Since then, the team has been working on the so what of this. What is the implementation plan looks like? And the paper goes on to seek your approval for delegation to be taken outside of this meeting to make sure the implementation plan can be finalized and implementation can begin outside of the meeting cycle that we've got here. This is particularly important given the budget announcements yesterday, and there were about 3 or 4 employment and skills related significant announcements like Connect to Work and others. And the work that we've done up till now, this report, this review ensures that there's very little room for confusion in terms of how we will act when such devolved responsibilities come our way, and us being able to implement, get the implementation plan up and running really quickly would be quite crucial in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. And I really do welcome the clarity of this plan. Any thoughts? Yes. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I made this point in briefing to Michelle yesterday, and she took the point and others did. So the content, absolutely fine, no issues with. The point I wanted to make was I felt as I was reading the report I needed a level 4 qualification to make sense of it. And my question was, who is it for and aimed at? And actually you could make the same comment about a lot of our reports, that while they do need to be high level, they do need detail, but it reads as a senior local government officer report to be read by senior local government officers. And I think there needs to be some work done into how we make these things accessible, because the point was made, but it's not meant to be a public facing document. The point I made was we're in a public meeting discussing it and sharing it, and I would hope that members of the public might think, actually I'd like to see what's going on and how my money's been spent. So it's sort of a wider point, right? I'll certainly support the recommendations, but I just wonder if we can do some work on how the presentation is put out to help make it accessible to the people it's intended to help.
Councillor Lamb, I do agree that we should have papers that are accessible to absolutely everyone, and to be an easy read, more for me than anybody else. So Ben, would you like to come in?
yeah, just endorse those comments. I think it's a fair fair comment, and we will make sure we pick that up. Slightly flippantly, I would say you should see some of the things that don't make it to the combined authority.
Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Yeah, and I'd just like to welcome this approach, really. I mean, I think it's so important from an employment and skills point of view that things are devolved to the community level, even not just the local authority level. And I think we in the combined authority understand that and work as partners of 6 partners, working to make sure that those people who wouldn't necessarily come through the doors of any of our institutions at regional or local level do perhaps go into a local community centre and are supported into skills and employment, which really transforms lives. So I think getting this right is really important. I know there's a lot of thought gone into this for all 6 authorities to make sure it's the right model for delivery, to make sure more people have more opportunities to put more money in their pocket and support themselves and their families going forward. So I think it's a good piece of work, and let's make sure it happens and make sure it functions well at our local levels. Thank you.
Thank you, and certainly I want to see the skills level rise across West Yorkshire so people can move between local authorities as well and have that strategic view of what do our businesses need, what do our ambitions for our sectors, what do we need to backfill. So, for example, mass transit, we're going to have to be prepared in a skills pipeline for 4 years ahead so that we've got the training time to get them ready for transport engineers or modellers or whatever. So it's a good piece of work, and I think that Team West Yorkshire approach is always good. Okie doke. So are we happy to endorse the recommendations set out in the final summary report by Shared Intelligence Appendix 1 and to delegate the approval of the implementation plan to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Chair of the Economy Committee? We are. Lovely. Moving on to item 10, and I'm afraid because we have had so much great discussion early on in this meeting, I'm going to be now fierce about discussion, because otherwise we'll be here till tea time. So we're moving on to adult education budget procurement. This is an update on the recent issues surrounding adult skills fund procurement. As you know, the skills funding is critical in supporting residents, as we've discussed. Since devolution, we've made significant progress, investing over £180 million, helping tens of thousands of people upskill. However, earlier this year, the Combined Authority took the difficult decision to pause the procurement process for the responsiveness element of the Adult Skills Fund due to concerns raised about the evaluation methodology. And while the decision to reevaluate was done in good faith, it led to differences in bidder outcomes and a risk of a legal challenge that would slow down delivery. As a result, the decision was made to reset the procurement, start again, to ensure confidence in the process and also get that money out to deliver skills training for our communities. Could I ask Ben to introduce the report, followed by Felix?
Thank you, Mayor. And I guess I'd just add that the responsiveness pot that you talk about that's affected by this decision is about 7% of the total, about just under £10 million. I think I've asked to just kind of introduce this paper to say that it provides a bit of an opportunity, really, both to explain what has happened, which is in the content of the paper, but also to just, I guess, put a marker down that we are very aware of the impact that papers like this can have on the kind of trust and confidence in the system. And indeed, it is to make sure that there is trust and confidence, as there is for the majority of the programme, that we brought this paper, which was a request from a previous CA meeting. The paper is effectively saying that we are where we are, partly because it's a feature of the current procurement rules that often the fastest way to resolve an issue when there is a threat of challenge is to stop and then start afresh the process. That in itself seems a curious turn of events. And so we are definitely wanting to look at how, with the coming of new procurement regulations, we can look at different ways to do these things. And I guess this opportunity has also come about because we're thinking that the method of procurement that we have has been one that was inherited from when adult skills funding was devolved. And we want to look at whether there's a more proactive commissioning style model that we can take forward. So although this paper has arisen because of some challenges to the process, it is an opportunity to look at how we can do things better going forwards. And indeed, in that context, it's always welcome to have challenge because it does allow us to try and improve things on a continuous basis. But I'll just hand to Felix for any particular items on the detail that you wanted to draw out, Felix. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll just draw attention to just a couple of things really on top of what has been said. One is to reassure the board that since these challenges came up sort of late summer, early autumn, a lot of work has gone in to make sure we fully understand why we are where we are and to make sure we can rectify that. So colleagues have worked really hard on that to make sure we understand fully what is going on and we put in mitigation. There's also work underway currently to make sure whatever we may have missed, we are comes to light and we're able to put mitigation in place. We expect that the company, with those two sets of activities underway, we should be able to go back to market on the remainder of the procurements, which we had to press pause on with this side of Christmas, really, which was the promise that we made when this happened earlier on, with the expectation that early in the new year we should be able to then let out those contracts so that residents who need the training will be able to get access to it. Whilst that is going on, there will be some more work that we'll be doing to make sure, as Ben said, our devolved powers and our responsibilities in this space is multiplying at a really fast rate. And the way we've been commissioning and procuring in the past will not necessarily be the best way to do that. So we committed to continuing to evolve, transform really this function so that hopefully by the summer of next year, we'll have a dedicated team in place that has the depth and width of the skills that we need to put us in the strongest position possible. Of course, human error can never be eliminated, but the work that we're doing should get us to the point where we can mitigate and reduce that as much as possible.
Thank you so much, Felix. And actually, it's welcome that every day is a school day, and learning from this, I think, is going to be valuable because it's going to strengthen our systems, and we've got to build that trust. And whilst devolution, we sort of lifted and shifted the devolved budget and the responsibilities, and we made some great decisions to streamline how many people we worked with, and we saved money by hiding the wiring. We did an incredible job. Now is maybe an opportunity to look again, and to Ben's point, is this the best way to do it? So I think it is, whilst it's awkward, it's also an opportunity to do better. So thank you. Any thoughts? Okie doke, lovely. Thank you all so much. So are we happy to note the issues outlined in the report and the actions taken? We are, great. So let's move on to 11A, project approvals. The first is on skills bootcamp. So Felix, would you talk us through the recommendations, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Be glad to know this is the last of the Felix show. This paper is about skills bootcamps. We are hopeful that in the future, with single settlement, things will be done slightly differently. We've brought this now because we expect the decision, the final confirmation of this funding to fall in between meeting cycles. This will be our sixth wave, as the paper says, of running this program. It's funding that allows us £7.5 million on this occasion, that allows us to specifically put training on that addresses skills gaps and skills shortages in the labour market, and which employers come to us, or which the evidence suggests that we need. We're asking you for this approval now in lieu of the confirmation coming in from central government, so that as soon as we have the confirmation, we are able to go to market. We are proposing to do things a little bit differently with this, so there'll be an element of grant funding with this that goes to some of the paper that I talked about earlier on around our skill system review. So we are able to provide grant funding and some certainty to our local authority partners and FE colleges, but also have a way then to be able to commission directly from the independent training provider market as quickly as we possibly can. So that's what this paper is seeking to do.
Thank you, and I'm pleased to see that the number of individuals who are going to get the opportunity increases from 3,000 to 4,450. Okie doke, so we're going to go through all of these project approvals one at a time, so if colleagues could be brief, let's take the papers as read. Are we happy to approve? We are, thank you so much. Moving on. The next one reports to approval report relates to the Brownfield Housing Fund and details one scheme that's been recommended to progress through the assurance process with the delegation of approval of a scheme to the CA's Chief Exec. So can I pass to Liz Hunter, our Director of Policing, Environment and Place, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So to be brief, the first one is Wellington Square, which is the one we're seeking delegation to the Chief Executive. You've hopefully got quite a bit of information there about the scheme, but there's some final details that we would like to clarify post the meeting. As colleagues will know, this is the final year of Brownfield Housing funding, so we are trying to work at pace to be able to deliver these schemes, hence why we're asking for delegation. The second scheme which we're seeking your approval for today is Mabgate Yard, also in Leeds, and that's a contribution of £4 million from the Brownfield Housing Fund. Happy to take questions.
Thank you so much. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm concerned, and I know that you are, that we maximise as many affordable homes as we can in how we invest the money that we have at our at hand. And I note that there's two schemes here for brownfield subsidy, which is to do with the viability of a scheme as to whether or not it will actually take place. And one delivers
20%.
Something like 20% affordable housing, which is pretty reasonable. And then another scheme delivers virtually nothing 2%. In terms of, it's 2%. Oh, thanks, Alan. He's the one doing the maths today. And it really concerns me that local authorities, as the planning authorities, have already been through discussions with developers in the planning process to negotiate what is appropriate in terms of added value to their developments. And so a lot of these developments have already been given leeway to not deliver public goods because of their developments. And I think when it comes to us delivering Brownfield Fund, we should be really strict about making sure that we prioritise our Brownfield Housing Fund to those that commit to delivering affordable housing on site. And I just thought I'd mention that because I think it might be something we might want to take up in terms of a scrutiny investigation, Mayor.
Thank you, and it was pleasing that the Deputy Prime Minister is focused on affordable house building. I'll take Councillor Lamb's question, then I'll come back to you, Liz.
Yeah, I was going to make exactly the same point, and I just wanted to echo it that as welcome as these schemes and developments of new houses are, 2% affordables. I think it was I've lost my place I'd highlighted, but I think it was 13 units or something like that in that size of scheme. 16. Thank you very much. Good double act. It just doesn't sit right that we're putting a public subsidy in and letting people off the hook on the right proportion of affordable housing. I doubt anyone sat around this table is particularly happy about whether we can do anything now. I've got no idea, but it doesn't sit right.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. You're exactly right. These have been through planning already. We are prioritising the schemes that are deliverable because, as I mentioned, we are coming to the end of the programme. We understand the District Valuer's Office did provide advice to the council about what was viable and therefore what the projects could achieve. I think it's an interesting point about if we have greater flexibility of our funding going forward, what the kind of criteria we might use if we decided to carry on supporting homes on brownfield. But just to provide a bit of reassurance that the schemes that have come through so far, we expect 31% of those to be supported by the fund are affordable. So we have tried where we can to promote schemes where there is affordable homes, but it is they have been through planning already, and it's the planning authority's responsibility to negotiate around what the affordable level is.
Thank you, Liz. With all that in mind, are we happy to approve these two projects? We are. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to the next project approval. This is tackling the climate emergency, and it's the Home Energy West Yorkshire. Can I ask Councillor Jane Scullion, as Chair of the Climate, Energy and Environment Committee, to comment on the report, please, and then handing back to Liz.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a really interesting time to be chairing a climate committee. It's topic of the moment. It's the potential for mission creep and be doing everything is really very, very powerful. And this paper that's in front of you is very much about what I feel is one of the core focuses in terms of any public sector intervention into this area, really. Old, cold, stone, pre-1919 houses, and damp and mould and bills. This particular project about homes and environmental sustainability and energy is absolutely core to us. This is about the direction of travel, further round of funding. And one of the key things I think about this is actually it's not just on housing association, affordable housing, or whatever. It's actually about rented housing, private sector rented housing, owned housing, home ownership, and actually where the bank actually owns your house because they've got the mortgage. So it's all types of housing. And I think it's absolutely crucial in terms of this stage. It's really quite key because it's about pace and scale, really. The time has come really to put some serious energy into retrofit. And I know that the Climate Committee could, start thinking about all kinds of things, and we do range in the meeting over wind farms, solar, offshore, all kinds of things. But actually, when it comes down to West Yorkshire, our core focus, retrofit, I think, is the right thing to do in terms of the intervention of public sector money to make things happen so that we've actually got a foundation for the pace and scale we need for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks. Nothing further to add. I'll take questions.
Lovely. Any questions on this project? Yes. Councillor Galton.
It's a very quick one. One of the things that disappointed me recently as a local councillor is that we had some homes which were considered not investable in, and they had to be demolished. And we got 70 new homes, but no extra housing had been developed through the millions of pounds that have been invested in it. One of the things I like about this scheme is that it doesn't say to anybody, you don't count. It's inclusive, and every type of housing is involved in this scheme. I think that's very positive.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you. I was going on to the Steeton and Silsden one. Are we okay to cover that at the same time?
No. We just need to approve this and then we can move on. Okie doke. Any further comments on the Home Energy West Yorkshire? No? Good stuff. We're happy to approve progress through the assurance process. Thank you very much. So we're moving on now to 4 schemes that are, we need delegation of approval to the Combined Authorities Chief Executive. So can I ask Councillor Hinchcliffe, as Chair of the Transport Committee, to comment on the report, then handing over to Simon.
I'll just hand over to Simon as we're short of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Simon, if you could talk us through the recommendations, please. And it's the 4 projects.
Thank you, Mayor. So the report, just to clarify on the delegation of approval, that's specifically for an item which we summarise in the front of the report, which relates to the proposed use of £100,000 of our BSIP funds for a mobility credits pilot, which will look to support a number of recent returners through the Adult Skills Fund programme into training and employment for 3 months' worth of travel support. The report then moves on to a series of specific capital schemes, the first of which is Steeton and Silsden cycling and walking improvements, which our colleagues at Bradford Council have brought forward in the form of 2 phases. There's further detail on that set out in the business case that is attached, or the link of which is set out in the report. At this stage, we are looking to draw down additional funds for the further development work, so that we can bring forward a full business case. We are not at this stage seeking all of the delivery funds, but we are noting the latest proposed delivery costs that are set out within there. So at this stage, for Steeton and Silsden, we are seeking approval of further development funding of £2.737 million to take the full approved funds for the scheme at this stage to £3.437 million. The second scheme is for us to move into delivery now for the A629 A629 North Orange Street active travel route, providing links through from Halifax town centre. The report does note that unfortunately this scheme does suffer from the ongoing challenge that we have in terms of DfT's appraisal regime and its shortcomings in terms of attaching value and benefits to active travel schemes, something that we will again be seeking to pursue with the department, but we do still recommend that there is strong strategic fit with the active travel policies of the combined authority. And then the final part of the report deals with our proposed approach to the management of Part 1 claims that are accruing from historic combined authority capital programme schemes, and the way in which we propose to manage those in reaching a final settlement figure for the Wakefield Eastern Relief Road scheme, and in setting aside a provision for potential Part 1 claims against the Glasshoughton Southern Link Road. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So, Councillor Lamb, you want to speak to the Silsden?
Take two on that one. I'm asking on behalf of Councillor Paulson, who sends our love to everybody. While the project at Steeton and Silsden is very welcome, the question won't surprise you. Is the bridge now being gold plated?
No, it isn't gold plated, and I've had conversations with Councillor Poulson, who's been raising quite rightly challenges around costs. We've done a lot of work with our colleagues in Bradford Council around the costs of the scheme. It is a fully accessible pedestrian bridge over what is a very significant piece of highway. In working through the costs with our colleagues in Bradford, we have found cost savings, and we are comfortable that the costs that are being proposed now are well benchmarked with equivalent facilities that we would see. And I would note that within that figure, there is just short of £3.5 million, which is still a risk provision. So that is not necessarily the final outturn costs, and we'll continue to work with our colleagues to make sure that we can minimise the impact on our capital programme whilst ensuring that it's a fully accessible bridge that comes forward.
Thank you. Councillor Love, then Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Can I just ask you about the £100,000 contribution from Bradford? Is that down to Section 106 funding?
I can't say for certain, but I think it probably is a development contribution. I'll come back to you, Councillor, just to confirm that.
Right, okay, thank you. It's very welcome that this is happening.
Thank you. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Yeah, I think, you know, Merrill devolution gives us access to infrastructure funding that we've never had before, doesn't it? And I think we're perhaps not used to seeing new bridges going up like this, and I've certainly welcomed this. And it is, my understanding is in line with other costs throughout the country, putting a similar infrastructure in place. It is crucial to this community. It connects two places which actually are very close by, but because of the road are really severed. So I I think Silston and Steeton deserve this funding and deserve the improvement in infrastructure that devolution brings. Welcome it, thank you.
Thank you so much. Are we happy to approve the projects as we've heard? Brilliant. Oh, sorry, I did say brilliant before people raise their hands. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Moving on. Just rattling through the pages. Thank you all for your patience. There was a number of approvals there. The under-19s travel scheme. So I said earlier in the meeting, I fully recognise the importance of affordable travel for everyone in West Yorkshire, but especially young people who've been hit particularly hard during this cost of living crisis. And the Fair Deal for under-19s introduced in 2021 has made a significant difference, allowing young people to travel at half the adult fare, supporting families across our region. However, as the report highlights, bus operators are facing increased financial pressures due to rising operational costs and have asked us to review the current fare situation. Now, my suggestion is, given that we still are waiting for the allocations from the 650 million BSIP funding, that we don't take this decision now, because I think we need to potentially see things in the round, whether that's the Mayor's Fair, whether that's other concessionary fares, how does it look across up to the budget in spring or through next year. So I just wonder if members are comfortable, we will defer this item and then convene an emergency CA meeting once we have the government's allocations in place, and then we can take a more holistic view of concessionary fares, mayor's fares and others. Yes, Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that's sensible. Happy to support that approach. I would just like to make a point that Simon knows in advance what I'm going to say, which I would hope could feed into that review in the extra time. So it's simply the first question. I don't know if you've got the answer from yesterday, Simon, as to what proportion of our young people live roughly in what I would call the outer ring of West Yorkshire. And the reason for asking the question is you could say get from Todmorden to Kippax, as many people want to, or Wetherby, as many more people want to, for £2. But if you lived in Wetherby or Todmorden under 19 and needed to go, say, to Harrogate or Manchester or Oldham for your education, for your apprenticeship or job or for leisure, that's going to cost you £4.70. And I think it's not an easy problem to solve. I totally recognise that, but if we're going to have a fully fair integrated system, it's actually about how people live their lives rather than which administrative authority they happen to live under. I think it's something we should look at as part of this to see if there's more we can do, working in partnership with, we've got the North Yorkshire Mayor now, working with South Yorkshire and Manchester and others, say, is there a way actually we could make those fares cross-boundary, which would give a big economic boost to all of the regions affected.
Thank you. And yes, to reiterate, I am working with the Mayor of North Yorkshire and South Yorkshire on trying to work out how we have that cross-border fare system that does make enormous sense. You're absolutely right. Councillor Hinchcliffe, you want to come in?
Yeah, just to reiterate what you said there, really, Mayor Brabin, that it is something we've raised already with North Yorkshire and surrounding authorities. Obviously, it's in all our interests to try and do that if we could. I suppose it's just the amount of cost, because they would have to fund things as well. So we're trying to work through what that would look like. But I think it's all our aspirations to do that, but it's just the practicalities of doing it, I think, is the challenge.
And Simon, you wanted to come in?
Thank you. So to advise members that the data suggests that education trips out of West Yorkshire to neighbouring areas look to be somewhere in the order of about 6% of learners in West Yorkshire. So as you say, we have for some time been engaging with colleagues on this front. I think the fact that we've now got clarity from government in terms of the funding position going forwards, and as you rightly know, Mayor, over the next week or so, we expect to receive our detailed figures, as will our neighbours. Then it's an opportune moment for us to revisit the issue.
Thank you, Simon. And as we revisit it, it would be helpful, I think, for the board to have an understanding of young people and how often they use the buses. And obviously, often many of them don't have a car and a bus is their only option. But it would be good to have the data. And just to clarify that, talking about the uptake of the mayor's fares increasing patronage by 10%. In some places it's 10%, but overall it's 5%. But it would be good also to know what percentage of those were young people, for example. So we can have a more detailed discussion when we have that dedicated meeting. So thank you. So we're happy to postpone that item. Lovely. We're happy? Yes, we are. Super. Thank you so much. So moving on, we might actually be on time, which is always good. So the White Rose Forest Partnership Agreement. This is an update on that programme and our proposal for the CA to sign the White Rose Forest Agreement for 24-30. All of you are aware of the importance of tackling the climate and environment emergency. Increasing tree cover is a vital part of this. The White Rose Forest is leading the way and great results so far, but more to do. Could I ask Councillor Scullion to introduce the report, Liz Hunter to take us through the recommendations, but if I could also come to Councillor Patterson, who may just want to talk to what is happening in Kirklees, because you're taking a very front-footed approach to this. Councillor Scullion.
Thank you. Very little to say, except it is important to support this ongoing work. This is basically bringing in money, funds from elsewhere, provides that leverage. It's very much White Rose, a Yorkshire, West Yorkshire forest. Of course, if acorns blow off our oak trees into Lancashire, we won't mind because we want to see the whole area forested. So important part, Calderdale are already signed up, and Kirklees, as Mayor says, taking a very strong lead on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz?
Thank you, Mayor. So we have been a signatory before to this agreement, so we think it's important to carry on for all the reasons already outlined. And I understand, so Kirklees obviously are the accountable body, so it's great, as you say, to have you leading the partnership, but it very much is a partnership, and there is a delivery plan which is being developed, which, being part of the agreement, enables us all to have a seat around the table as that delivery plan is created, and we'll be clearly updating the Climate Committee as that work develops.
And can I encourage everybody on the board to do some tree planting, because it's very therapeutic. Councillor Patterson.
There's not really very much to add other than say it's been an incredible success so far, and the number of trees planted, etc. And the White Rose Forest is the biggest delivery partner of the national forest project, community forest project. So Kirklees are very happy to continue to lead on this, to be the accountable body, and to work with partners to ensure its continuous success.
Thank you so much. Are we happy to approve the CA's becoming a signatory to the White Rose Forest Agreement? We are. Oh, so Councillor Galton, you wanted to speak. Apologies.
Sorry, yes. It was associated with the last discussion as well. I just thought for a meeting coming forward, some of the comment that was in the budget yesterday around devolution mentioned how the government is minded to ending funding for pan-regional partnerships. Now, I don't know what they mean by that, but this sounds like a pan-regional partnership because it's between West Yorkshire and North Yorkshire. The discussions that we're going to have around bus fares potentially are cross-border and could be hosted by something like Transport for the North. So I really think that some of those useful pan-regional bodies, it would be really good to have some surety going forward in terms of what is minded to be got rid of and what isn't.
Just to reassure you, Councillor Galton, that it wouldn't be affected. A pan-regional partnership is like the Midlands Engine. There is a body set up with an independent chair, often from the business community, to draw together partners, so that the potential for a pan-regional partnership could be the Great North, for example, that was announced a few months ago, that would then get funding from the government to be a more structured body. But they've made the decision that now we have the Council of Regions and Nations and the Council of Mayors, that's potentially where the investment should go. So I wouldn't be concerned that these partnerships will continue. Did you want to come in, Ben? Okay, great stuff. All right, so are we happy to approve the White Rose Agreement? We are. Good stuff, thank you. Moving on to item 14, business planning and budgets. This concerns the multi-year integrated business and budget planning for 25-26. Obviously, the current funding landscape poses a significant challenge for all local authorities in West Yorkshire. I do appreciate the efforts made by our partners to navigate these difficulties. As outlined in the report, this multi-year approach aims to align our budget with strategic objectives, ensuring we meet the needs of our constituents. Can I invite Angela Taylor, our Director of Finance and Commercial Services, to present the recommendation?
Thank you, Mayor. As you say, this paper is about setting out how we're approaching business planning and budgets for 2025-26 and beyond. We tried to make this an outcome-focused approach last year, and we're picking up on that again. And the intention is we'll produce a 4-year corporate plan, which will be aligned around the 5 missions. This will have set beneath it a 4-year delivery plan, and some deeper detail in the earlier years of that. So there's something very clear that we can be held accountable for in delivering. Clearly, the budget needs to align with those plans, and as the Mayor said, I suspect we said this last year, and we'll say it again this year, it's probably the hardest year to set a budget, and the local government sector is facing a very difficult funding landscape. So this paper sets out our particular risks and challenges within that, starting from the lack of a clear funding model for MCAs at the moment, but also recognising the pressures on local authority partners. From sort of section 3.6 onwards, 3.10, it sets out a long list of our risks and pressures. I don't think there'd be anything in there that will be unexpected. I think they're things you'll have all seen before and come out from some of the other conversations. So this is a bit of scene setting. Obviously, at the time we wrote this, we didn't know what was going to be announced in the Chancellor's budget yesterday. And rather than second guess that, what we need to do now is build on. This is what we knew before then. We now need to layer in what we learnt yesterday and be clear, therefore, how we use this information, what we learnt yesterday, and how we build that together into a budget proposal for this authority to consider. Part of that, we'll be looking at how we use our gain share funding. That, again, needs to be shaped depending on where there is funding coming through in other places. So we needed some of the information out of yesterday's Chancellor's statement to do that. We're also looking at doing a level of public engagement and consultation on the budget this side of Christmas to help in informing those ideas. So we're bringing a full report back to the meeting in December of the Combined Authority. If there's anything members would like us to particularly take into account in setting our budget, happy to take those comments. Equally recognising the time, if people would want a separate discussion outside of here, absolutely happy to arrange that also. Thank you.
I'm grateful for that, Angela, thank you. And the 4-year budget makes so much sense, doesn't it, in the term of the Mayor, and also it does align with the government's approach to a multi-year settlement. Any comments that are swift? If not, you could contact directly, if that's okay. If colleagues are happy to do that, because I know this has been quite a long meeting. And if we wanted to get into the detail, I think it would be worth a longer conversation. So expect your inbox to be full, Angela, for comments from colleagues. So are we happy to note the multi-year planning approach being implemented for the 4-year period, 24 to 28, and consider the budget challenges and risks associated with this plan? We are. Lovely, thank you. Moving on to the scrutiny annual reports 23-24, it's for us to note the report recently approved by the new scrutiny committee, and thank you for all of your work undertaken by our previous 3 scrutiny committees during my first mayoral term. Played a vital role in my thinking and during the early stages of devolution. Can I personally thank Councillors Peter Harrand, Geoffrey Winnard, Amanda Parsons-Hulse, Andrew Pinnock, Stephen Baines and Peter Caffrey, who led scrutiny as chairs and deputy chairs, and of course all the scrutiny members over those years for their hard work and contributions in building the current system. I'm also glad to note former chairs and deputy chairs, Councillors Bob Felsted, Richard Smith and Barry Anderson, are still on the committee now to help steer it through its new era. So if I can hand over to Alan Rees, our Chief Operating Officer, to outline the recommendations.
Thank you, Mayor. Very brief. remarks, noting that this is from last year's set of 3 committees, and the position has since changed. We now have a single committee, which Councillor Anderson is the chair of. Obviously, scrutiny forms a key part of our system of accountability and assurance. Last year, 3 committees: corporate, transport and economy, each one of them carrying out their own reviews into various aspects of the Combined Authority's work, and each one having the opportunity to question yourself, Mayor. One of the key things that they looked at was, of course, the scrutiny protocol and level 4 devolution, as was called, which then led to the change in the way in which scrutiny operates. I don't intend to go through the report in any detail, particularly given the time. It's here for the Combined Authority to note, and Councillor Anderson might want to say something about the position of scrutiny from 2024 onwards.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Anderson?
I'll be as quick as humanly possible because I need to get to a planning meeting, so I've got an interest in this as well. I've met with every member of the scrutiny committee to find out what their interests are, and I'm trying to fit square pegs into square holes, etc., etc. I've, as was remarked earlier on today, I've probably met most of the senior management corps within WICA to try and understand what's going on, and as a result of that, I do think scrutiny this year has contributed so far into the AEB process, the Bradford interchange, and risk management and performance management. We've contributed to that. There's more to work. There's a report meant to be coming to the next Combined Authority meeting where we'll put even more flesh on the bones, and we're currently refining our work plan, and after yesterday that will be refined even more because there's other priorities coming forward. So on that basis, thank you.
Thank you so much. And Councillor Galton, if you could be brief.
Yes, thanks. As a scrutiny chair in one of the constituent authorities to the Combined Authority, I think there is a great potential for co-working and cross-working to ensure, to share the load of scrutiny and to make sure that local voices aren't missed out when we're looking at the decisions that are made by the Combined Authority. So I look forward to a second iteration of this journey on scrutiny to think how we can put together those partnerships. In particular, for instance, the ability to call in a decision, because at the moment it's restricted simply to the members of a scrutiny board itself within WICA, or alternatively to escalate issues from constituent authorities to WICA to look into. It's not beyond the wit of man to create protocols to allow that to happen, and I look forward to working with you to enable that.
Thank you. The points are heard. Thank you. We don't need to act on that at this moment. So let's move on. Are we happy to note the Scrutiny Committee's annual report at Appendix 1, summarising the work undertaken by the previous overview and Scrutiny Committees 23-24? We are happy. Thank you so much. The penultimate item, governance arrangements. This report covers a number of different recommendations, changes in committee membership and proposals to establish a revised governance arrangements in relation to the appointment, discipline and dismissal of our most senior officers. I've asked Caroline, unfortunately, to be very brief. So Caroline Norris, Assistant Director of Legal Governance and Compliance, could you talk us through the report and recommendations?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I will take heed of that request to be speedy on this. The first 3 sets of recommendations do relate to membership on committees. Appendix 1 there has the proposed membership for the newly appointed Economy Committee. There are just a couple of further changes to that to just capture for the minutes that came in after publication, which is that Richard Paxman, shown there as a private sector rep, will be moving from this committee to the West Yorkshire Business Board. That's one change. And in terms of the higher education advisory reps, it will no longer be Peter O'Brien, but will be Sue Cook and Martin Stowe. So we capture that for the minutes. Otherwise, we're just seeking approval to that membership. The second membership point is in relation to the independent members, proposals for 2 new independent members on the Governance and Audit Committee. The report sets out the recruitment process that was undertaken, including the chair of the G&A committee and members. And there are 2 names put forward there for approval to go on. We think this, it's really good, strong candidates and a good outcome from that recruitment exercise. The final membership point is to note that there are 2 vice chairs have been appointed to the scrutiny committee, Richard Smith and Matt Edwards. So that is the first set of 3 recommendations around membership. The fourth one there is to note that the Chief Exec, under his delegation, has made an appointment to the Capital Programme Director role. And again, that has been a process that has involved members, so hopefully that doesn't come as a surprise to this meeting. And then the final part of this report is putting forward a set of proposals for members to revise the arrangements we currently have in place in relation to appointment dismissal, and dismissal of our senior officers, and to propose that we move to a different model for that, with the introduction of an employment panel to assist the combined authority. And what we've sought in the report, and hopefully it is self-explanatory, I know there's a lot of information in there, is to actually take a tiered approach to that and say, actually, in terms of the most senior officers, so the chief executive and the statutory officers, they remain matters for the combined authority itself to take a decision on, but that the employment panel is used as part of that process to support the combined authority in terms of making recommendations in relation to those matters. But then it also has a function in terms of taking decisions around the appointment of executive directors, and has a role in the HR processes in relation to that tier of directors as well. So there's a lot of detail set out in there. Partly that is because we don't have processes in place around these at the moment. So for transparency, we have actually set that out in quite some detail in the appendices. I should just say, in terms of consultation to bring this forward, we've consulted with the heads of legal and through them heads of HR at each of the 5 partner councils, and we've also consulted with the unions as well, who are supportive of us bringing that transparency and that clarity to this process. So I shall pause there, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Lovely, thank you so much. I think this is really welcome development, just gives us a bit more structure. Any thoughts or comments? No, thank you. That's brilliant. So can members confirm their agreement to the full set of recommendations as set out in paragraph 2 of the report? We are, thank you. And just as was noted that there's a new director of capital projects, it was remiss of me not to welcome Tim Taylor, who is the head of transport services. And very welcome, given transport is going to be a huge priority for us as a region. So you are very welcome, and hit the ground running absolutely in the first few days. So thank you very much. Okay, so minutes for information. The report provides members with details of the minutes of committees, informal meetings. So please do avail yourself of that if you wish to have a look. And I'd like to thank you. This was a big meeting after a big budget, and times are changing for us here in West Yorkshire. And as always, I do value your contributions. Thank you all so much for attending and for your patience. I'm sure you're all starving. Thank you so much, everybody. And also just remind members, the next meeting is Thursday, the 12th of December, with an interim meeting before then on the buses and funding before then. Okay, thanks, folks. Cheers now. Thank you, Miles.